Hello CloudCannon friends. I'm Tom, a developer here at CloudCannon, which is a Git-based CMS for static site generators. Today we're going to use Astro, which is one of the fastest growing SSGs out there. We'll take a theme off their free themes page, which you can find at astro.build/themes, and we'll start configuring it for CloudCannon using our configuration mode. Configuration mode allows us to configure the editing experience on CloudCannon, making changes to our configuration directly in the place that config is affecting. There will be a repo with all of the steps I've taken in this video and any setup steps that I've done before the video. I have downloaded the images on the site so that they live in the repo rather than coming from a remote Unsplash URL. And I've removed a couple of things that are a bit expensive for build times but don't really have any bearing on the tutorial. Things like image optimization, SEO generation, etc. You can see those steps if you're interested. They'll be in the Git repository linked down below. Let's get into it. Okay, so we've found a repository that we want to build on CloudCannon. This is a popular Astro template called Astro Ship, and you can find that on GitHub or the Astro templates page. I've just made my own copy on my own GitHub, which has an integration with CloudCannon, so I can go ahead and go to CloudCannon and create a site. I'll attach my GitHub, I'll find my repository, and then I'll select the branch that I like and give it a site name. Cool. So we're met with this dashboard when we first come into CloudCannon here with a getting started guide. We've actually already completed this first step, which is connecting our Git repository or uploading our files from local storage. So we've connected our Git repository. I mark this as complete. We can then use the same guide to create our config file. So I'll do that. And CloudCannon's detected that we're using Astro. So I'll just fill in the suggestion. If we like, you can see what CloudCannon will generate as the initial contents of this new config file. So I can click create that, and I can mark that as complete. Now I can group my files into collections, so hit show me how, and it will highlight this config mode switch up the top. I can hit that, and a bunch of purple buttons will appear around the app, and I can just hit edit collections, and CloudCannon will suggest a few folders in our code that it thinks might be content directories that it wants to provide editing for. We can then again see what changes this would output into our new config file. So I'll hit add, and I'll mark that as complete. Cool, let's start our tour. Let's go into one of our collections. We can quickly next through this, giving us a quick overview of what controls we have here. So yeah, we can make some changes with our config mode on in here. Different options for how to configure this collection and how the app looks and acts for our editors. I can see off the bat that CloudCannon's given us an icon of tram here, which is close to team, but probably doesn't make much sense. So we can demonstrate changing that. Search in people or something, and you'll see a nice emoji people to use there. We can configure the previews of these cards as well, so that there's something showing instead of no preview available. First, I'll go in and see what the contents of these files look like. So they're markdown files with front matter values, and I can use some of these to give nice previews in the collections browser. So I can come in here, edit preview, add preview. I can see text is already using the name, which is a nice default. So I'll just add some config for subtext, and I want to use one of those keys from front matter, and I'll use the title for the subtext. You can see that's immediately popped up down here as our subtext, and I want to do something with the image. So add gallery, add image, and then I'll use another front matter key. This time it's nested at avatar.src. You can see those images pop up. I can also change the fit of these images. I think I'll go padded. And then if I'm happy with these previews, I can then come to this config mode, turn it off, and this is what editors would see. They wouldn't see any of these purple buttons around the app, and they wouldn't see the option to toggle config mode on. And that's just controlled through the permissions on your site, either the default permission groups or custom permissions if you have them configured. Cool, we can show some more config mode in action. If we just go to our blog collection now, we can again turn this config mode back on. So we might want to change some more things in our interface here. So let's look at how we would maybe change our sorting. There's a bunch of different sorting options in here. We might not want this many. So we can come in, again, using keys from the front matter of these files. I know that one is title, so I can sort by title. And then we could also have one sorting by publish date. Again, a front matter field. I could come here and toggle this off to see what editors would see. And then in here, we just have title and publish date. Let's turn this config mode back on, and I also want to make these previews a bit nicer in here. So I'll quickly go through and do that. So this time for the subtext, I will use the author. And for the image this time, it's instead of avatar.src, it's a different front matter path of image.src, and I can change this fit cover. Maybe we'd like to also configure how our editors will add new posts to this collection. So we can come back into the add options. If we check out right now what the add options are, you can either add a post or create a new folder. Let's say that we don't want to allow editors to create new folders. We can just disable that, and they can only add blog posts. We also might want to prevent some of these file actions, disable file actions in here, and you can see we've met with this more simple menu. Again, I can show config mode with that off, and you'll see editors will just see the same things that we've just configured. So no file actions, no option to add a folder, and that's all just through writing new config to our config file using this config mode. We can go even further. We can go into one of these posts and actually edit inputs as well. So these inputs on the left represent front matter in your markdown file. This body text on the right represents the body content. You can see that in the source editor here. We've got the front matter, body content. So we can configure these inputs for these front matter fields. We can turn config mode back on. Let's try with draft. When we hit edit for one of these inputs, we're met with a modal that asks us at what scope would we like to add this input config. So from a post in the blog collection, it makes sense to either add it to the whole blog collection or globally across your whole site. So this one will affect inputs or front matter fields of draft in your blog collection. This one will affect inputs of draft across your whole site, and these cascade similar to CSS. So site one is less specific than the collection one. But for now, we're just going to add config for the post collection. So we'll add it to the collection config. We'll make draft type switch, and you can consult the docs if you want to look at all the different types of inputs we have, or just use this drop down to scroll through. And you can see that straight away changed the appearance of this input to an editor. Let's do some more inputs on this page. So let's change this image one. Yeah, src is just a text type input, but we want this to be an image type. You can see that change straight away. Nice preview now. Publish date, I know is a date time, so I'm going to change this as well. Instead of a date input, it can be a date time. And change one of these to a required input. So this is a type text by default, but to access the options on that input, I need to give it a explicitly defined type. So that's text, and now I get the text options, and I can make this required. So you must have a title to save. I can show what happens when you clear that. It says requires a value. I could also add my own custom message here, like blog post requires a title, and see that pops up here. Cool. So we could go to a different item in the collection and see that that config should have affected all of the same inputs because we were putting it at the collection scope. So you can see draft was a switch, titles required with that same message, and date time works, image.source works. Cool. So we can turn config mode off there. Save those changes. We can view diffs of these, so we can see all of the config that we've added, and all of this has been through that interface in app rather than having to write this YAML out by hand. Of course, you can write the YAML by hand if you like as well. Both should work together. So let's just make sure we've completed our guide. I can go back to the dashboard here. We've tooled our collection browser, so let's skip that. We saved our config file, marked that as complete, and we've finished our getting started guide. So that's a quick overview on how to use our configuration mode to configure a site's editing experience on CloudCannon. We'd love to hear any feedback you have. You could either contact us through our support channels in our community space, or you could leave a comment on this video. Be sure to check out our tutorial on how to set up visual editing on your site next, which is a continuation of what we've done here today. Thanks for watching this far. I really hope it was helpful. Happy building, happy editing, and I'll see you in the next one.